Welcome to the Education Charter. My name is Daniel Wiśniewski. I'm here with Professor Michalinos Zembylas from Cyprus. Professor Zembylas, thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you.
You are an expert in peace studies, peace education, citizenship education from the Open University of Cyprus. And we've invited you here to talk about your country, about the country with two different systems of education that, being in Europe, has these challenges of citizenship, of peace. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, well, education in a divided place, in a divided country. Thanks a lot for accepting the invitation.
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel.
Professor, most of our viewers would not be coming from Cyprus. Therefore, we would have to somehow start this discussion with a historical background a little bit. What has happened in 1970s? And, well, maybe from your perspective, I suppose probably the Turkish Cyprus will see it differently. But what has actually happened, first of all, and how did that affect the education system in Cyprus?
Yes, thank you for the invitation again, Daniel. I'm very glad to be here. You're right to start with the historical question. We need to historicize the situation in Cyprus to be able to understand why there are two different educational systems in Cyprus. And it goes way back before the 70s. I mean, if you look at the history of Cyprus and the Ottomans' conquest of Cyprus in 1571, that was the initial time when Ottomans came to Cyprus and they formed communities here, and their descendants are the Turkish Cypriots that are living on the island today. I mean, Greek Cypriots have a longer history, but you know, we don't want to get into the disputes of, you know, the narratives
Who
about
was here first.
Exactly. I mean, in all places all over Europe, there are all these kinds of discussions, but I don't think they will get us anywhere. The point is that there have been not only Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, there have been Armenians, Latins, Maronites here, different communities living together for many centuries. And basically they would self-identify in religious terms until, you know, the nation state came a century or 2 centuries ago and messed up everything. And so the terms of the game have changed, and from Muslims and Orthodox Christians or Catholics, you know, they became Greeks and Turks and so on. And so, you know, with the rise of nationalism and the creation of the nation state, you would see, you know, that some of the conflicts arise in the late 19th, early 20th century. And so we have the two major communities on the island, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, basically competing for power, just like anywhere. So naturally, you know, the education of those communities were initially, it was initially religious education, and then on religious terms, or offered by religious, you know, teachers, and then, you know, it became national.
Okay. Can I just, you know, because in order to sort of make this this talk interactive, I will be stopping you. Please don't be insulted.
Yeah,
I will try to stop.
Of course.
I will be stopping you. So, in other words, you were having this religiously divisive kind of groups that were arriving to Cyprus. You were having let's say the lines of divisions who used to be religious. Now they turned into later on they became national, let's say.
Yeah.
And and then of course politics came in.
Yes.
So what has is this still the case that they would be somehow this cultural slash religious divisions would be present? Or is it as you say, is it more about now politics, power, and let's say two nations, Turks, the Greeks, fighting together, and the question is, how does that reflect the education system now? Because I assume that in the past, as you said, that the education system would be somehow around these religious groups, but right now with the modern times, let's say, they would somehow be designed in different model to kind of either promote the Greek point of view or the Turkish point of view. Is that correct?
Yeah, the national identity, exactly.
Yes.
And so when the Republic of Cyprus was established in 1960, you basically had two different education chambers, the Greek and the Turkish. And so the kids were going into different schools and different educational systems. So from the beginning of the independence of the Republic of Cyprus, you already had divisive elements. And education, I think, can be one of the most constructive and at the same time, perhaps one of the most divisive elements in creating a new state. And unfortunately for Cyprus, the fact that it had two separate education systems or school systems, or however you want to call them from the beginning, it was an element of division, which continued and it continues till today, because we're talking about, you know, the North and the South having two different educational systems. The North, which is still occupied by Turkey now for 50 years. You know, there is a Turkish-Cypriot educational system, and in the South, you know, the Republic of Cyprus, there is basically an educational system by the Greek-Cypriots run by the Greek-Cypriot educational system. So they have different trajectories, different visions, and different goals, which, if you take into consideration the political sensitivities and the conflict, the ongoing conflict and division of the island, you can understand why, you know, everything about education is so sensitive, from, you know, the talk about history, you know, or national identity. Those issues, you know, become easily controversial in both sides. You know, any attempt for educational reform is immediately or can immediately be perceived as an effort to change the national identity, to make people, you know, forget the past or forget their history and things like that. So these are some of the major challenges.
Okay. Now, how do they, so you mentioned a little bit how they differ. If you could elaborate a little bit more on how do they differ? And then I also have questions, what happens to the, well, Turkish Cypriots living in Cyprus? So there's, of course, Turkish Cypriots living in the north of the island, that is the occupied territory. But me, myself, being to Nicosia multiple times, I do see that there is a significant minority there of the Turkish origin. Do those people also have their schools in Cyprus, not on the occupied territory? And another question even coming up is it at all possible that the Turkish Cypriot could go to a Greek Cyprus school, or is it not at all?
Yeah, there are very few Turkish Cypriots of Turkish origin students in Greek Cypriot schools. There is at least one school that we know of in Limassol that has a large number of Turkish origin or Turkish-speaking students. And there are, of course, a couple of hundred Turkish Cypriot students coming from the north to the south to attend some private English-speaking schools. in the
Okay.
south. So there is not a large number of Turkish-speaking students in the south, in the Republic of Cyprus. The opposite, there are a few remaining Greek-Cypriot students, what we call the enclaved, who live in the north and attend Greek-Cypriot schools in the north. And there have always been different kinds of challenges for them attending those schools, because there have always been some sort of hurdles imposed by the authorities in the north. I mean, everything, since you said you visited Cyprus several times, uh, um, everything can be easily politicized on both sides of the green dividing line. So I mentioned before we started the effort by the Technical Committee on Education, appointed by the Turkish Cypriot and the Greek Cypriot leaders in 2016. I happen to be the co-chair, the Greek Cypriot co-chair. We've been trying to respond to some of these challenges. We have a mandate to bring the communities together, the students and the teachers. We realize that those challenges exist and we cannot hide them under the carpet. We have two totally different educational systems that sometimes teach to the students totally conflicting narratives. Every side has its own narrative about what happened, in 1974 or what happened in 1963 and so on. So what we tried is to bring together these young students, first of all, to get to know each other, to contact each other, because they haven't been in contact, officially at least, for several decades. And then, at some point when the ground is ready, then we can talk about the most difficult issues. But we have been avoiding these controversial issues for obvious reasons. We know from the literature that it's not productive to start talking about those
The
issues.
differences.
Start talking about other common issues, issues of human rights, issues of interculturality, issues of social justice, or justice in general. I mean, those issues that are common, and every educational system, if we take the Council of Europe about critical citizenship and democratic citizenship, I mean, educational systems would hardly disagree about some common issues like this. How you teach the future generations to have these skills of democratic citizenship, empathy, solidarity, and so on. So you don't have to go into the difficult issues of history. That doesn't mean you put them under the carpet. You just say, well, let's start from building some trust first, some common understanding, some mutual respect, and then at some point when we prepare the ground, we can talk about more controversial issues. Besides, the point is not for the kids or the teachers to resolve the Cyprus problem. That's not the issue. The issue is to be able to deliberate on difficult issues without becoming fanaticized, without becoming extremist about it. And there are ways pedagogically to do that. And that's what we've been trying to do.
But before we talk about, how you bring these people together now, I wanted to come back to the question of how do they differ? So you say that they are completely different, but then can we elaborate a little bit on how do they differ? So I assume in the Greek-Cypriot schools, your language of instruction is Greek. You have an EU diploma, probably you are part of Bologna process, etc., etc. In the Turkish north part of Cyprus, it's completely different. How do they differ first? So we can kind of create a picture, and then we can talk about how do you kind of try to at least establish dialogue there.
Well, first of all, we have to understand that education is not neutral. Education is political. So it means that whatever educational goals or visions for the educational system, for every educational system, is a political vision. So from there, you can understand that there are differences in terms of what visions the two communities have. And I'm not at liberty, or I don't feel comfortable talking about the vision of the Turkish Cypriot side. You should ask, the Turkish Cypriot. I can tell you about the Greek Cypriot educational system that for many decades it was promoting a very strong national identity and not forgetting the occupied territories in the north. In recent years, there have been some reforms trying to bring more educational goals and pedagogies aligned with democratic citizenship, with critical human rights education, with intercultural education, with peace education, and so on. So there has been a shift, but there's still a lot of work to be done to kind of remove away from the dominance of the national identity goal. So
So can
I
you tell
would.
me, can you then tell me how is the Greek Cyprus? If you cannot speak about the Turkish, maybe we don't have to focus on the differences. We can focus, can you describe how it is done in the Greek Cyprus? Is it, the division of, I don't know, again, Bologna system, so you have primary, secondary, and so on. How is that organized in the
You
Greek
mean in
system?
terms of the structure of the educational
Structure,
system? Yeah, there
language,
is a kindergarten school. From now, there has been a recent decision to accept kids from 4 years old at the kindergarten school. That will be enforced step by step in a number of years. We have primary school from 6 years old to 12, and then secondary from lower secondary from 12 years to 15, and then upper secondary was what we call lyceum from 15 to 18.
Okay.
So this is basically the structure of the Greek Cypriot educational system.
Okay. And the language of instruction is Greek. And
Yes.
of course, as you say, well, obviously, education is in every country really a political issue to build certain identity. In different countries, it is understood in a different way. Some there would be around, again, common language. Others would be about regionalism. So I'll give you an example. In Spain, you have education that in different parts of Spain, they would be using different languages of instruction. Why? Because they want to. But of course, they want to kind of raise up this spirit of regionality. And it's always a political question. Now, you said that you're trying to build bridges between them. So I could imagine that on the Turkish North Cyprus or occupied territories, I don't know what's the politically correct phrase, but
well, the politically correct is the north and the south. We use geographic terms.
Okay, so the north, let's call it the north. So on the north side of it, I assume that their system is not like yours. They will be more closer to, let's say, the Turks, I don't know, the Turkish government and so on. So they would somehow cooperate. Now, how do you bring these people together? You mentioned that you started intercultural dialogue. You started to talk about pedagogies. Do you have any exchange programs, let's say, between Turkish students, Turkish teachers, Turkish school leaders, and so on, so on? Trainings. Cyprus, again, Cyprus is a small place. And I even know that there's lots of Greek Cypriots living on the other side. And so how does it work?
Okay, we, as part of the mandate we had from the two leaders in 2016, a major pillar in this mandate was to formulate a conduct, a program between the students and the teachers from the two communities in the north and the south. So This is the so-called program Imagine that was also awarded a Gene Award in 2021. And the program basically has 3 steps. It has a monocommunal preparation step where trainers go to Greek-Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot schools, and they, train the students who are about to meet with, students from the other side. They do activities on human rights education, peace education, citizenship education, without touching, and this is important, on any controversial or difficult issues between the 2 sides. So they do activities about, social justice. They do activities about students or children's rights. So things that are common in both educational systems and frankly in every educational system. So we want to build this bridge by not touching on these controversial issues, at least not from the very beginning. And then the second step is the students come together, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, at the home of cooperation in the buffer zone between the 2 sides. And the program is run by the Association for Historical Dialogue and Research, an NGO that is registered in both sites. And it's a Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot, or it's comprised of Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot. It's a bi-communal organization, in other words. And they are running the program under the auspices of the Technical Committee of Education. And then the third step, they do activities for a whole day. Everything, all the expenses is covered by the German Foreign Ministry, the German government, and we are deeply obliged to them for covering all the financial expenses for more than 5 years now. From the buses that take the students to the breakfast, to the trainers, all the expenses. And then the third step is the students go back to their schools and they have some kind of continuation of collaboration depending on their will and their time and so on. So this is roughly the program, and it was run until 2022, and unfortunately in late 2022, the Turkish Cypriot administration in the north decided to withdraw from the program for political reasons that, there is no reason to get to them right now. But it was a very unfortunate event because by that time, we managed to bring together 6,000 Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot kids and about 1,000 teachers who are also doing different teacher training programs together. How you build trust, how you bring together the 2 communities, how you teach about, issues of human rights, social justice, peace, and so on. So the program is not running officially now, at least in the north, for the last 2 years, 2.5 years. It's running in the south. I mean, it's basically monocommunal in the south. But this is not, as you understand, it's not satisfying to us because it doesn't bring together, the students, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. That's the ultimate goal. So my point is that, again, this is another example of education, falling a victim of, the political sensitivities and the political conflict on the island. At any moment, any side could say, well, I don't like this, I withdraw, and, the victim at the end of the day is the future generation. So we are basically losing valuable time after 50 or more years. We are losing valuable times of educating our kids to live together in peace. And that's the unfortunate event at the moment, that there is not something, there is no exchange at the moment, there is no official contact. There are unofficial events, and activities in the afternoon, by different NGOs. But I was talking that this was the first time that the two educational systems were, in a sense, collaborating, trying to bring their students and teachers together to build a common understanding. So the Cypriots are losing at the end of the day from this unfortunate development.
I wanted to, I mean, you mentioned here a little bit about the systems of education, but I wanted to also ask you, there are, of course, social inequalities between one part of the island and the other part of the island. My understanding has been that the north is, let's say, much less economically developed than the south. Do you, the reason why I asked you whether you accept Turkish speaking students into the, let's say, southern system of education was related to another question, which is, do you have a significant migration between these two parts of the island because of economic reasons, let's say? I mean, look, I'm coming from a country, from Poland, and in 1980s, 1970s, 1960s, we had a significant, was very much politically limited, but there was at least a significant will of many people to move to the West. Why? For in search for better life, for better working conditions, for freedom. Is this in any way the case? Does it happen in Cyprus? And if so, does the education system accept this kind of families and provides education for them at all?
There is migration of Turkish Cypriot workers from the north to the south on an everyday basis, several thousand. However, they come in the south in the morning and they go back in the evening. They don't stay here. So, I mean, the issue that you're describing is not existent in the sense that we don't have Turkish Cypriot kids, except, a handful. I mean, we don't have this sort of large migration that you're talking about from the north to the south to come here and live permanently and send their kids in the schools. And you're right that, I mean, economically, there has been a large gap, especially in 2003 when the borders between the two sides were first kind of open. There was a huge disparity between the two sides. I mean, gradually it's kind of easing out, and there are different regulations by the EU for commerce between the two sides that aim precisely to kind of equalize these differences that exist between the two sides. But we need to understand that as long as the Cyprus problem remains unresolved, those kind of disparities and differences will continue to exist, either at the level of economy or at the level of education or everyday life. It's inevitable that there is no normality in this situation that's been going on for several decades. So unless there is a political solution that reunifies the island, I'm afraid that all kinds of these disparities will face them one way or another.
And I have really one more question for you. what do you think the future is of this? Is there any, I mean, right now the world is going through a tremendous change. It's going through a tremendous change politically as well. Cyprus is one of those countries that is at the border of the geopolitical struggle that is currently taking place worldwide. We have war in Ukraine. We have, well, the war now in Palestine and with Israel and in the Middle East. Well, are you in any way feeling threatened by what the future could hold with this Cypriot case not being resolved politically? Whether you're optimistic on it, or what are your thoughts on what could be the future on this?
Well, the more that the issue remains unresolved, there's always all kinds of possibilities. I mean, you can see, like the examples you mentioned in between Ukraine and Russia, or Israel and Palestine, an event happens and then everything becomes upside down. I want to believe that the people here are more mature and they have learned from the mistakes of the past and the traumas of the past, but the history tells us otherwise. I mean, even if there are these traumas of the past, somehow people, when they find opportunities, they seem to be forgetting those histories. So I want to be optimistic. I mean, there is a new round of effort now for negotiations. There are no negotiations for the longest time that we remember, like 6-7 years, with no negotiations at all. This is not good for either side. We are leaving the time to pass without any kind of effort, and that is not good. It's a lose-lose situation for both sides. So I want to be optimistic that this latest effort by the UN will lead to some negotiations that eventually will lead to some kind of a solution that will be a compromise from both sides, and that will be a win-win situation for both sides. But the only thing that is for certain is that for 50 years now, that the problem is unresolved. I think both sides are losing. And sometimes we realize it and sometimes we may forget it. But I think it's a lose-lose situation the longer that this division remains.
Maybe this common realization that this is indeed a lose-lose situation can be a foundation for something new. Let's leave our viewers with this message. Thanks a lot, Professor Zembylas, for your time.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks a lot for being part of our education charter, for sharing this story. And to our viewers, of course, if you like what you see, comment, give us a subscription, of course. Help us to spread this word. I think that the story of Cyprus is one of those that can serve as a warning and as a lesson to learn from, on how education can be used, and is always somehow used for political reasons, and yet how it can be used for peace, for fostering peace and dialogue. Let us see what you think about that, and stay with us for the next episodes. For now, I thank you and see you next time.
Thank you.